Hey, welcome back to the Wellbeing Show. Got a couple of great guys with me this morning. I'm going to talk about their organisation out in the city, which is based up in Manchester. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves to you. As always, the show is pre-recorded, so you can't really phone me during the show these days. But if you've got questions, send them to me on WhatsApp, 07 506 319 745. If you've got questions for my guests, then I'll pass them on to them. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer them. That's enough of a preamble, I think, for me. Hi, guys. How you doing? Up in Manchester, sort of in the dark, I think, still.
Up in the frozen north.
We're fine, thank you.
North of the Arctic Circle somewhere, by the looks of it. So introduce yourselves. Tell me who you are and tell my guests who you are.
Well, my name's Tony Uppenshaw.
Yeah.
And I'm the coordinator for the group out in the city.
Great. And your mate?
I'm Norman Goodman, Tony's partner.
Yeah.
I'm 73, and I met Tony through going to the wonderful Out in the City group.
Superb. Welcome. So how long have you two been together then?
Well, it's in January, it'll be 2 years.
Congratulations, guys. Well done on finding love later on in life. So congratulations. And you met through this organisation that you set up, is it? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. You both from Manchester, I guess?
I am, yes. I'm from Manchester.
Yeah, Tony.
I'm originally from Bolton, which is only 15 miles away.
Yeah.
But I've lived in Manchester for 40 years, so I consider myself Mancunian.
Yeah, Manchester is a great place. I mean, it really, for people who haven't been there, it's a fantastic city. It really is.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah. I used to go up there a lot. I used to have a fantastic theatre scene. I don't know if it's still up there.
Yeah.
There was the Green Room was there.
Yeah. I don't think that's there now.
No.
Right.
We are very fortunate with our theatres.
Yeah. It always has really thriving new theatre, live theatre, and also live music. And also it used to have, what was it called? Did they call it the Triangle in centre of town? That group of clubs, bit like Soho used to be, with a strong LGBTQI community.
Street.
Yeah, there is the gay village is available now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
Is that still there? Because that was, I remember many years ago when I used to.
No, it's thriving and as strong as ever.
Great. I mean, one thing, it's interesting, one of the things that's happened in London as times have moved on, things are less defined in terms of specific communities. So things have tended to lose the branding, as it were, and become more sort of like Soho now, I would say more is a tourist attraction than anything else, which is a real interesting turnaround from the early days of Soho. Is this similar sort of vibe in Manchester now? That
no, there's a concentration of gay activities and pubs and clubs, mainly in one area. So it is a gay village. It's recognised as such. Yeah.
Is it a safe space to be for people to turn up and sort of meet each other and feel safe and comfortable?
Yeah, it's very good atmosphere, very good environment.
Yeah.
And I would definitely say it's a safe space.
Yeah. It's always seemed like that in Manchester. It's always seemed quite diverse and open. I mean, there's obviously things that get presented on the media around moss side and violence and stuff like that. But, that gang-related stuff is unfortunate, but usually limited to, specific areas. But outside of that, my experience of Manchester over the years has been a very thriving, open-minded, cultural city, a sort of real centre of the arts and communities and diversity. Is that appropriate to say? Does that chime with your experience?
Oh, definitely. Now, we've just opened recently the new Aviva Centre, which is for the arts.
Yeah.
There's lots of theatres, live music, as you say.
Cinema.
Cinema. It's a great place to live.
Yeah. I mean, you two guys, I mean, you've mentioned that you're in your 70s, and congratulations. Well done. You made it.
Thank you.
So I guess sort of between you, you've got quite a lot of experience and quite a lot of experience of the changes in the culture around being gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. In the UK, not just in Manchester, but in the UK in general. Do you mind if we go back in time and talk about what it was like and your experience of coming out, whether you came out as kids, what you knew, what you didn't know? It's always, I find, very interesting talking to people with the sort of experience that you've got.
There's been such tremendous changes in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I knew I was, a gay guy when I was 16.
Yeah.
I was brought up in quite a religious family, Roman Catholic. So I went to go and see my priest and tell him that I was gay. He said, love the sin and not the sin. You have to be abstinent. So I thought, well, I'd rather not go to church. So
Right.
Anyway, my parents basically thought, this is a phase. You'll grow out of it.
Yeah.
And I sort of persisted.
Did you come out at 16 to your parents as well?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Well, I was fairly sure. I was sure about my identity, myself, what my feelings. So, yeah, I didn't have anybody else to talk to, really. So at that time, there was no role models. You didn't get gay people on television other than Larry Grayson or John Eden.
Yeah.
So these stereotypes on television.
Yeah.
I saw Quentin Crisp actually in a documentary in 1970. This was sort of a standout thing, and I thought, I'm a bit like him, but not quite, but a little bit like him, and that's why I decided to tell my parents. Anyway, they said it's a phase, and I said I kept coming out to them, and they got me a doctor's appointment to go and see a psychiatrist.
Really? Oh dear.
And the psychiatrist.
Sorry, I laugh now, but I guess they thought they were doing the best thing, right?
Yeah,
they thought there was a problem, right?
So I went to Bolton General Hospital to see this guy. My dad came with me and sat outside, and the psychiatrist was reading from a textbook.
Was it?
Have you got an absent father? And I said, no, he's outside. Have you got an overbearing
hilarious
mother? Have you got an overbearing mother? I said, well, I don't think so. So I didn't fit the stereotype. I didn't. So he then went and told my dad that I wasn't gay.
Because you didn't fit the diagnostic criteria, right? Okay.
So that made it even harder to come out.
Yes, quite. I'm sorry. That must have been. Was it? I don't know. Was it upsetting at the time? I mean, I think it's hilarious now looking back on it.
I think it's hilarious looking back on it, but at the time, it's quite stressful.
Just so people should know who don't know, particularly younger people, being gay used to be diagnosed as a mental illness. It also used to be illegal.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody's ever seen some of the films about the Second World War and the guy who cracked the Enigma code who was gay, but had imposed celibacy on him. He was forced to take medication so that he had no sexual appetite. And he would be checked by the police and stuff like this. This is what used to happen. I think the younger people, they're like hearing these things. They're like, what? Because the world has changed, but you were sort of on the edges of that, weren't you, really?
I think it was still considered mental illness till early 90s.
Well, getting very current, and I'm going to make a point here as a mental health professional. There's a thing called conversion therapy, which is a dreadful, awful thing that people buy into. Have you heard about it?
Oh, yes.
It's absolutely appalling. So I'm going to say, as a mental health professional, I'm a qualified mental health professional. I'm regulated by the Health and Care Professions Council, AS 00582. If you want to challenge anything I'm saying, folks, that's it. So I'm legally required to tell you what is honest and true. It is not a mental illness, ever. It's never been a mental illness being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. None of this is a mental illness. And there's a thing called conversion therapy, folks, that if you hear about it, stay far away from it. It's a dreadful thing where sort of people who should not have any qualifications in my field at all will diagnose somebody as ill because they experience themselves as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and then we'll try to treat them for a mental illness. And given it's not a mental illness, it causes untold damage and harm. And you'd stay away from it, folks. Don't ever send your kids, or don't ever go there yourself. You'll just end up being very distressed and very anxious and very depressed by the experience. That's not to say gay people can't have mental health problems like anybody else on the planet. Sort of a lot of it from oppression, I would say, but there you go. So I needed to do that. That's my professional bit over and done with. So going back in time to these times when you saw the psychiatrist, this is so funny for me. I mean, it's just like a snapshot of the way things were. So you saw this psychiatrist, and then what happened?
And he told my parents that I wasn't gay.
No.
And my parents, being Roman Catholic, decided to kick me out of the house.
Did they?
And I didn't see them again more than 2 or 3 times for the rest of my life. You know, they're both deceased now, obviously.
Right.
So basically, I was ostracized by family.
Yeah.
And I had to make my own way through life, which I've done until now.
Okay. What age were you then when they decided to ask you to leave?
About 19.
You were 19, very young.
Yeah. And the age of consent was 21.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It wasn't reduced to 18 and then 16 until later on.
Yeah.
Anyway, I met a partner, Philip. We lived very happily together for 31 years.
Wow.
But he died when he was 54 with pancreatic cancer.
Right. Right.
And at that time, marriage wasn't an option, because that only came in 2014.
Right.
Although there was civil partnerships from 2006, I think.
Yeah.
But he died in 2011, and we've been together for 31 years.
Yeah.
Now, in the hospital, I was told I wasn't next of kin.
Yes, that's right.
I wasn't allowed to register his death. You know, so there's been some traumatic things have happened because of just being an ordinary gay guy, and you know, being told that your relationship isn't valid.
Yeah, it was much more common, like you say now. Legal statuses have changed, but prior to those changes, I mean, I had a lot of friends. I used to work in theatre way back when, and there were it was a diverse community in theatre, and
Lots of gay people would come.
Well, it's very diverse. It was great. I mean, it was wonderful, sort of accepting, open community, little community, sub-community of its own, which lots of waifs and strays such as myself would turn up and be sort of brought in. And I remember the first wave of issues around HIV, for example, and very close friends who passed away, whose partners weren't allowed to have anything to say. And I remember a lot of my friends at that time deciding to get married to lesbian women so that they could have control over their potential death. And they would, and there were things like that happening all the time. Again, I think for younger people, they're going to listen to this conversation and go, "What? That's terrible." But it was literally the truth, that you had no rights over your lifelong partner, and you weren't recognised, and that would have significant problems in terms of property rights upon death, in terms of access to benefits, pensions, homes, etc., etc. I mean, there were as well as the emotional sort of impact of being told you weren't legitimate. I mean, that must have been very upsetting to you at the time.
Yeah, it was very difficult, that. I mean, as you mentioned about HIV as well, we've made our friends as what we call our logical family. not our biological family. We've got our logical
I
family.
love that term. That's great.
We meet our friends, and then during the early days of HIV, a lot of people were dying.
Yes.
So we were losing friends.
I stopped counting. I lost so many people. I just stopped counting. It was overwhelming, to be honest.
To me, it was about 100.
Yeah.
People I knew, because I've been very active in the LGBT community for many years, so I knew a lot of people.
Yeah.
And very upsetting.
Yeah. My profession was devastated. I mean, absolutely decimated by this at that time, and so was I as a person. I remember it was really quite horrifically traumatizing, the whole experience, and at the time as well. Also, we were all going through. Everybody who's touched by this stuff were going through profound grief and loss. Very close friends going in a very short space of time. I mean, it was as frightening as this most recent issue around COVID, when I was very frightened, but it was very similar to that. And there was the state didn't step in to protect anybody. It really didn't. Society didn't gather round. Actually, the victims were being blamed at the time, which was awful.
To me, it felt like a war.
Yeah.
And nobody knew about it.
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have feelings about it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Move on to Norman now.
All right, Norman, let's bring you in. Thanks, Tony.
Okay,
That's really, really good.
Well, my life has been quite complex.
Yeah.
As a child and in my teens, I thought I was gay because I did fancy men, especially pop stars and actors I would see on television.
Yeah.
When I was, I think, 17, from the age of 11 to 18, I wanted to transition.
Did you?
From male to female.
Okay.
And I was determined, which was called in those days a sex change.
Yes.
I was admitted. I was talked to the doctors, to psychiatrists, asked all the relevant questions, and I was admitted into Gaskell House, which is on Swinton Grove in Ardwick. And they gave me a course of electroconvulsive therapy. I never knew then I was given that because I was classed as probably insane, or definitely mentally ill. After I had the course of ECT, I was then given a course in aversion therapy.
Yes.
Aversion therapy. It was very, very difficult at the time. But when I was discharged, I could see I wasn't going to get the sex change.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, I've got to get on with my life. So I started working. I was in nursing, and I was an orderly, and then I went into nursing.
Yeah.
And when I was 22, I then met my wife. And when I met her, I thought she was absolutely lovely, like a doll. And I fell in love with her. So I thought then, wow, I must be straight. We got married in 1974.
Yeah.
And we got on with life. But a few years later, I realised that I was still attracted to men.
Yeah.
And I thought, gosh, I'm still attracted to men. But I kept this to myself.
Yeah.
Then, in 1984, I was 34, and I had a bit of a breakdown, which was caused from stress from my nursing.
Yeah.
And I was in hospital for 3 weeks. And I was sat on the ward, the psychiatric unit, and I was sat on the ward in Prestwich Hospital, and I thought, I like men, I like women, am I bisexual? And I was 34 when I spoke to the psychologist, And he kind of confirmed that, yes, I'm bisexual.
Quite.
And he said to me, you can leave your wife and, you know, find a male partner or stop with your wife. And I said, oh, no, I said, I'm not leaving her. I said, she's been very, very good to me.
Yeah.
It took me 10 years. When I was 44, I told my wife I was bisexual.
Right.
Now, she was very bright, my wife. She was very bright. And she already knew. And she said,
it's so common, that story.
Yeah,
you build yourself up, you tell people, to go, yeah, I know.
Well, women are very intuitive.
Yes.
And
people who love us often know.
Yes, and we loved each other. We loved each other. We were both very, very loyal.
Yeah.
And she said, right, this is between you and me, she said. We're going to get on with our life. And I went for counselling.
Yeah.
Now, when I was young, I didn't bond very well with my dad.
Yeah.
My mum did suffer with depression. My late brother, I didn't get on with. So it was quite lonely in the younger years. So got on with life. Then, in 2017, my wife died. She had non-Hodgkin lymphoma, which became aggressive very quickly. And she passed away in 2017. 2 years later, I was literally bursting to come out. There was a mountain inside of me ready to erupt.
Yeah.
I never knew how to come out. However, I'm a volunteer at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester.
Yeah.
And we got a new what's called cultural champion coordinator. And cultural champion meant I get invited to lots of cultural activities because I'm very much into media.
Yeah.
And she brought the LGBT Foundation in to give a talk. We all met at the People's History Museum. And when they finished the talk, they were looking for volunteers, 60 plus, to make some audio cassettes about what life was like for gay people in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, quite.
And I thought, this is an answer to a prayer.
Oh.
So I made a tape, and then those tapes are now in the archives in Central Library in Manchester. And in years to come, when I'm long gone, hopefully those tapes will help young people.
Yeah.
Colleagues at the Royal Exchange Theatre helped me and supported me. And I did tell one or two members of the family. And then the cultural champion coordinator, she told me about Tony's group out in the city. And I joined out in the city, and I thought it was very, very sociable. In fact, quite a few of us say it's a lifeline where we can be comfortable.
That's right. That's right.
It's a safe space. We have an outing every week, and it's lovely to be with like-minded people.
Yeah.
And things escalated. I didn't know a lot about LGBT plus. I'd never really been on Canal Street.
Yeah.
I've never had a relationship with a man. So 2 years ago, when Tony told me he had feelings for me, I was absolutely in shock. He said, I'm not interested. I don't want a relationship. I'm not interested. However,
great.
Tony has a sister, a younger sister in Bratislava, and he went over at the Christmas and he texts me every day and he phoned me on Christmas morning, and I was sat in my living room and I was thinking, should I give it a go? I'm not doing any harm. I'll give it a go. And when he came back, I said, as long as you give me time, I will give it a go. And Tony said to me, he said, look, he said, I'm not telling you to forget your wife, he said. He said, and also, he said, take as long as you want.
Right.
the beauty of this is we are both really happy. Tony is a very patient, very loving man, and he's learned me a lot, and I am really happy.
Beautiful. What an amazing story. I want to come to the group in a minute, because I want to talk about social groups, particularly for us folk who are a bit older, and loneliness. I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about loneliness as it relates to groups of people who still face ostracism from society, and how important it is for having social groups, safe ones. I also want to talk about like listening to both you guys. There's something about words and language and stuff like that, you know, and there's words and language at the moment are really important around gender, sexual identity, sexual orientation, transition issues that you've mentioned. Back in time, and we're hearing these words now more and more, and I just, you know, every time I hear the conversations, I want to jump up and down and applaud the courage of people. I feel quite emotional saying that. I guess some similar generations, so I know what was. But what's interesting, what's striking me as a mental health professional is that when you were younger, and I include that in your 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., that there was a lot of words and language that wasn't available, a lot of conversations that were disallowed. You know, you were in your 30s when you discovered this term, you know, bisexual, and what that might mean. Now, for me, and I can't talk about your experience, but for me as a mental health professional, not being able to identify yourself for 3 generations of your life would be wholly destructive to your psychological development.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was straight acting. It was extremely difficult, and being Jewish as well,
right,
didn't really help matters. Because when I was young, you know, in the Jewish community, a lot of Jewish people in those days, didn't recognize or didn't want to recognize LGBT. I belong to what's called the Reform Synagogue, which is a very, very relaxed way of Judaism. And we have a lot of LGBT plus congregants. We have lady rabbis. So I'm much more comfortable there. The only sad thing is that after I lost my wife, all my wife's cousins, she was an only child. There was one phoned me every morning, 1 or 2 others phoned me. And since Tony and I have been together, 4 of them have all fell out with me, which is very sad.
Yes.
And I was upset, but now I say to myself, it's their problem, it's not mine. Yes. So but in answer to your question, it was very difficult, really, not fitting in with other lads, not fitting in, and I'm not a big sports fan. So yes, it was more than difficult.
And it's that thing of finding a way of communicating. I mean, we talk a lot these days, just to give people some sense of it. We talk a lot these days about this thing called emotional intelligence, which is a word that both you guys know, because you have it in spades. You've done your own personal work, you've come to understand yourselves, and you've processed some of these really quite dreadful things that have happened to you just because of you were born, right? So you didn't have control over that. But emotional intelligence, if we think about it, is the ability to understand what's going on inside you. And put words to that, and then communicate those words to somebody else, and have those experiences validated by somebody else saying, well, I understand that. And that's a fundamental need that all human beings have, is that another human being validates through communication, non-verbal and verbal communication, the validity of their personal experience of themselves. Okay, we need that. And we don't have that. We don't join the herd. Now, the herd human society is one of our most fundamental survival mechanisms. It is literally why human beings dominate the planet, is our capacity to organize into social complex social groups. Okay. And there's all sorts of neurochemical processes that take place when we bond with another human being that allows us to engage in complex social interaction. If we don't have that, psychological damage occurs. And a good example of that, so that people understand this, is if you're in prison, the punishment in prison is being sent to solitary confinement, to be removed from human interaction. And it's a devastating punishment, you know. And people that are in long-term solitary confinement in prison, I know this, I've worked in prisons, end up with psychotic disorders. They disconnect from reality. They lose their mind. That's what happens if you're confined on your own. And there are all sorts of awful, terrible things that happen to people because of this isolation and this lack of ability to communicate yourself, your experience, connect it to another human being and have that other person is a form of being sent to solitary confinement while you're in society. And it's a dreadful, isolating, damaging state of affairs, which is partly why I wanted you guys to come on, so that people understand this stuff and can contextualize these conversations that are going on now. Because, and again, I'm going to make a point and then I'll get your opinion on it. Like, I really celebrate at the moment young people going through transition and talking about their transitions. Because I know as a mental health professional that up until the legal rights that have been gained recently, those young people were cutting themselves and hurting themselves and killing themselves. Okay, because they felt this isolation and rejection. And I wonder, do you have any thoughts about that? And then I want to move on to your group and why that's important. If you have any thoughts about these conversations that are going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think just to, if I can just give an anecdote or some sort of context. When I was much younger, I lived in Bolton, which is quite a large town, and I lived on Halliwell Road. And on Halliwell Road there were 9 pubs, and I lived there all my life until I left home. And one of these pubs was frequented by gay men.
Yeah.
And it was about 1 bus stop where I lived. I didn't even know about it.
Right.
Nobody spoke about it.
Right.
Nobody even warned me against it.
Yeah.
Nobody said, don't go with that.
Invisible.
It was
absolutely invisible.
It was just invisible.
Yeah.
Nothing was spoken about. So to realise that you're gay at a young age, but not to have the words really to express it, and nobody giving you any information or advice or support, I think is a very difficult thing, which makes you very isolated.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Norman, would you add anything about these ongoing conversations?
Well, I agree with what Tony. I agree with what Tony said. There was very little knowledge when we were younger, and there was no one to talk to. Fortunately, I had a cousin who I was very close to, and she was the only person that I could talk to. But it was a very lonely life for some people. And of course, as they became older, they became isolated.
Yeah.
But now, there's a lot more, you could say, on the market for people. There's more kind of help groups, advice groups. I mean, Tony and I was at the Proud Trust on Saturday, which is for young people.
Right.
There was none of that in our day, unfortunately. So we've progressed, but we still have a way to go.
Yeah, and it's great progress, and we need to protect that progress because there are people who would take it away. Let's move on, if that's okay, to Out in the City, which is the organisation you set up, Tony. Tell me about what motivated you to do that? When did you set it up, and what was the motivation for that?
Right. Well, to be factual, the group was set up by Age UK Manchester, but I joined the group in 2015 when I retired, and that's 8 years ago. But the woman who was running the group herself, she retired herself and decided to move out of the area.
Yeah.
So that's when I took over in 2018.
Okay.
So I've been running the group for 5 years now.
And so what was the idea behind 4Age UK of setting up a group for older LGBT plus community members?
Well, I think it's recognised that our health outcomes, whatever the correct word is, are much lower than our heterosexual peers because of isolation, discrimination, a lifetime of stigma.
Yeah.
As you get older, the gay scene isn't as attractive. We don't even know what apps are, So,
I think we should have seen the problems we had starting this show. Just trying to get the computers working. That was fun.
These modern form of communications, are difficult for us older people. So
not missing much, Tony, I promise you.
So the idea of having a social meeting where you meet face to face breaks down a lot of loneliness, isolation, and we've used the word already. It's a lifeline for many people. Each week we can meet, have a chat, share news, strengthen our friendships, make new friends. We have meetings. About 20 people come to the meetings.
Wow, that's great.
We've got a larger pool of people.
But to have 20 people regularly turn up is really impressive.
20 people each week, yes. And we have trips out each week.
Great. Beanos, as they used to be called.
Yeah. We've been on train trips out to Leeds and Liverpool.
Right.
Went to see the Happiness exhibition about Ken Dodd in Liverpool.
Did you?
And we just do local things as well, go for a pizza and things like this, or cinema, or we go to quite a lot of concerts at the Bridgewater Hall, classical concerts, and the theatre as well. Wonderful. So we have a wide range of trips out every week. So there's a trip out and a meeting, and again attracting about 20 people each time. When we have a party, which we do it in June for Pride, and we do it at the Christmas time for the winter period, we might probably get about 60 people come along.
Serious?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. How about you, Norman? What attracted you to it, do you think? What was the pull for you?
Well, I've always had problems in my life, being bisexual, in fitting in and socialising.
Yeah.
So when I heard about Out in the City, I thought, gosh, this is just what I need.
Yeah.
And so the first time I went, I felt very comfortable and very much at ease. And I got talking to some of the people who go. And there was a lot of warmth, a lot of very good energy. And I thought I fit in nicely.
So you found your little tribe, as it were.
Yeah, I found peace with myself. And I couldn't, at first, I couldn't go on any of the outings because my voluntary shift at the Royal Exchange Theatre was on a Thursday evening. But when the theatre opened again, the welcome desk that I worked on, an information desk, that's been took away. And I thought to myself, why don't I go on the outings now on a Wednesday now? And I started going on the outings, and I started finding places I've never heard of. And I just thought to myself, my life is changing. Right. And other people now that I come across over 50, we do encourage them to join out in the city, because we're always welcoming new members.
Yeah.
And so it does alter your life. It's a lifeline, and it does alter your life. A lot of older gay people are very much within themselves.
Yeah.
And they won't go anywhere because they're frightened. They won't fit in well.
Yeah.
So, as we all said before, it is a lifeline.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a chap who lives in Scotland, and when he comes to Manchester, he comes. so I mean, that says a lot.
It's wonderful. I mean, I'm just going to reinforce this lifeline issue. So for people that don't know, there's now research evidence is very clear. The NHS have commissioned this research, and it's been backed up by organisations like Age UK, etc., Age Concern, etc. That
excuse me for 1 second. So excuse me.
You got somebody at doorbell. Don't worry. Just for information, don't worry about that. It's a sort of. Right, you've frozen. You're back, Tony. You're right. You're back. Don't worry about the phone and stuff like that. So just so that people know, one of the biggest killers of older people in the UK at the moment is loneliness.
I'll speak to you very soon.
It's actually very, very destructive. And that's older people in general, because isolation and loneliness happens. And one of the things about this sort of point in our life as we get older is the truth is our social network dies off. That's the truth, right? As people get older, we lose contact, and also much of the social networks that exist are based around younger people and going to the pub and clubs and stuff like that, and you may not have the appetite for that as you get older, etc. And so isolation and loneliness becomes a really significant problem for people who are older. And you've mentioned it, Tony. It's increased by a factor of significant numbers when you belong to a community that is still ostracized. And that would include BAME communities, for example, or it would include LGBT communities. Women might feel it as well, that they can't go to certain types of communities. So there's a need for, if you like, individual tribes and individual communities. And Norman, I mean, you give a superb example of why we need these labelled spaces, if you want to call them that, because you have had the experience, and you described it beautifully, of feeling at home, maybe for the first time in your life. That's extraordinary. That it's how old were you when you suddenly felt, oh my God, there's a group of people that get me and accept me? I mean, how long did you wait for that?
I was 69.
Exactly.
I was 69 then, because I came out at age 69.
Yeah. Absolutely extraordinary. And,
so
and again, so that people know, again, this is the health evidence. What this experience is called peer support group. You may have come across those terms. You know those terms. And peer support groups now are supported by the NHS. They fund them. And because we know that if you join an effective peer support group, your mental health improves and your physical health improves. Okay. Not only do you live longer, you actually live longer, but the quality of your life is better. You're less prone to illness, literally. And therefore, we don't have to pay loads of money for you turning up to hospital. That's the bottom line here, folks. We make money out of it.
Can I just add, for anyone who's listening, it is never too late to come out. It is never, ever too late, because you have to be at peace with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Tony, how long have you been running the group now for?
Just over 5.5 years.
5.5 years. 5.5. And why did you decide? I mean, you must have been slightly bonkers to decide to take on organising it. What's wrong with you that you would do that?
This man is magnificent.
I know.
I'm a hero.
I am. I'm not worthy. I'm sort of absolutely know that.
Well, I've been involved in the group already for 3 years.
Yeah.
And it becomes such an important part of my life. You know, my previous partner, Philip, had died.
Yeah.
I retired. So when I retired, I decided I needed to, have some something in my life, hobbies or meetings and so on. So I joined a group, and I was involved in it for 3 years. When Sue said, "Well, I'm retiring and I'm moving away," the group had a possibility to close down, and it was so important to me that I stepped forward and said, "Well, I'll run the group as a volunteer."
Yeah.
So I do fundraising, websites, organising. It takes up quite a bit of time, but I enjoy it.
Absolutely. And it's a good example of why these groups are so successful, because people commit to them and are willing to put the effort in to keep them going. And that is gold. It's absolute gold dust. Guys, we're sort of coming to the end of the show, and I told you it would go really quickly, didn't I? I warned you.
Yeah, it has. It's flown,
hasn't it? Always flies. Everybody goes, "Oh, that's too long. We can't fill that time." I'm going to ask you some questions, if you like. I'm going to ask you to think about this question and come up with an answer for me. Without this group, where do you think you would be right now if you didn't have this group? What sort of state would you be in? Would you be better off or worse off, or what would be happening in your life? So, Norman, you look like you want to answer that first.
Well, for me, before I was going to the group, I was at the cinema a couple of times a week, and I went into different towns. I'd get the train to Buxton, the train to Glossop, or whatever. But because I've got out in the city that Tony coordinates, my life is now fulfilled. Yeah.
Wonderful. So you'd be living a quite strange, lonely life and putting
it was rather lonely. I was missing my wife, and of course I still miss her.
Yes.
It's 6 years now, but at least I've got fulfillment. I mean, I've learned so much from Tony. He has the patience. He has tremendous patience, very placid, and I'm very fortunate because I am now 73, and fate. I am a believer in God, and I have been given a second chance in life of love, and it's wonderful.
And you're not going to mess about with it. You're just going to get on with it. Good for you.
Oh yeah,
treasure it what it is. That's.
I mean, our job now is to try and help other people. That is where I see myself.
Yeah.
It is that virtuous circle thing happens when people are involved in it.
That's right.
They see the value of it and they go, right, I'm on board. I'm going to make it happen for other people because it's transformed my life. And you get that virtuous circle rather than before you were in what we would call a vicious cycle.
That's right.
Now they're automatically getting better. Tony, where would you be without this group, do you think?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm very independent, but during COVID times when we were isolated and we couldn't go out, that was the worst time of my life.
Yeah.
I've never felt so lonely and isolated. My parents were deceased, but I didn't have a family except for a younger sister who lives abroad in Bratislava. So it was a very, very lonely time. During normal times, I can go out to the theatre and that. It's still not the same when you go on your own.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Having friends or partner to go with. So it's my life, really. It's what I'm so involved in. And I love it. I really enjoy being in the group, enjoy organising things, and I don't know what to do without it,
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic was so scary and frightening and isolating. It was a really difficult experience for me. And the first thing I did when we could get out of it was I joined a local group-based set of activities. Again, I'm going to put a health spin on this. So I know about the evidence. And if you go to your GP now, folks, they can do what's called social prescribing. okay, rather than pills. And with social prescribing, what they can literally do is give you membership of an activity group, because we know that if you join a group of like-minded people doing a shared activity, your health will improve. That's it. And it's not a soft outcome, it's a hard outcome. Your life will get longer, and the quality of that life, and for us guys who are in this generation, it's not about longevity, it's about quality of that life. We don't want to be going in and out of hospital, lots of illnesses, being on lots of pills and all that sort of stuff. And joining these groups can actually improve that and reduce the need for medication, reduce the risk of falls, slips, trips, falls, etc. That's right. I mean, and so the first thing I did when the pandemic was over was I joined my local yoga center to get some exercise, but I did it in a group environment because I knew I needed the social interaction. I needed conversations with people. I needed people in my life who I didn't like as well, that I had to be polite to, because it's really important for our psychological development that we are able to maintain ourselves and maintain a range of relationships. And the evidence for all of this is absolutely unequivocal now. The whole of society suffers if we don't support each other. The whole of society suffers. You know?
I joined a group called Children Good Neighbours.
Did you?
And got involved with doing some drama.
Great.
So, I enjoyed that.
Brilliant. That's so fantastic. We're going to have to finish. Tell me, how do people find out about your group? Have you got a website or a Facebook group or what?
Yeah, we have both. Go to the website. It's very simple. It's outinthecity.org.
Outinthecity.org. Okay, great.
You'll find us there. There's a contact page. You can send a message through the contact page.
Yeah.
There's lots of information on the website, and you can sign up to it. It's written as a blog, so you can sign up to it, get weekly messages, emails from us. Wonderful. We send those out to over 300 people.
Yeah.
And actually our website has had 58,000 hits this year. We're very popular.
Of course you are.
People, I mean, if you didn't know, there's gay people all over the world. There are gay people all over the world. I think we've had hits from like 98 different countries.
Brilliant.
So a little group in Manchester, and people are reading us in Mozambique, Ecuador, Iran, etc., etc.
And in some of those countries, it's very regressive, isn't it? So,
yes.
I mean, you know, so it's dreadful what's still happening in some countries. I would reiterate that being gay is a normal part of life. It's a normal part of human experience, and actually it happens in other species as well. It's not just humans. It's right across many species on the planet. It has always been, and it will always be, a very important part of human experience, and we need to treasure it. Like we need to treasure every single human soul, to be honest.
I recently wrote an article on the website. Some penguins are gay. Get over it.
That's right. Do you know why some penguins are gay?
Well, it happens in the animal kingdom.
It does. That's right. And they're there because heterosexual penguins die off, and somebody needs to look after the egg. There you go. That's what happens. Literally, what happens. And gay penguins couple up.
Yeah.
For life. For life. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. Anyway, we have to leave it on that note. You two stay there. Folks, it's been lovely to have you here. You've got Out in the City. Go and check out the website. And they're a warm, open group that will welcome you if you're ever in Manchester. If you live there, join, I would say. Don't hang around at home and be lonely. And if you're visiting, go and say hello to these lovely people who'll take you out for a nice meal, a nice show, beautiful activities. I'll see you all at the next wellbeing show. We're going to have to leave it there for now. You guys stay there while I sign off, and bye-bye for now.